I have a new appreciation for what's going on in these major cities. I think that all major cities are crumbling. And I don't mean to be alarmist or very dramatic about that. It's just that I spent a lot of time with entrepreneurs that are in Paris, and they struggle with the same things that the people in San Francisco do. And then I had a couple of conversations with some folks that are entrepreneurs in London, and they suffer from the same things. Lots of petty crime, lots of garbage, lots of vandalism, lots of drugs. And so no place is perfect, it turns out. Everybody is struggling from a lot of experimentation gone wrong in how these cities run. I would say that India has its own vagaries, so those issues are not the same. I've been to Singapore a couple times. My kids were just in Japan for spring break, so I saw a bunch of the pictures. Those cities look relatively the same. Very orderly, well-run, clean. But these Western cities are a bit chaotic.
You also had this referendum in California that essentially lowered a whole bunch of felonies to misdemeanors. If you steal less than $950, that's considered a misdemeanor now instead of a felony. So there's been a huge increase in crime because of that. Shoplifting just doesn't get prosecuted anymore. And misdemeanors don't get prosecuted anymore. We've had all these stores, DAs who don't want to prosecute misdemeanors.
When New York City was a chaotic mess in the 70s and 80s, it took two different mayors and it took almost a decade for that to get cleaned up. They hired a lot more policemen and they just really cleaned up all of these really bad areas. And then it had this knock-on effect. When I'm staying at a hotel in Paris, or when I was speaking to some of my friends who live in London, it's the same thing. It's like the amount of knife crime is so egregious, as an example, that they tell you, don't wear a watch, etc. I mean, I don't wear watches anymore when I go out. But what's crazy is they will tell you that you'll get stabbed over a phone, where it's like, you don't need to stab me for my iPhone. Here, just take the iPhone. That to me was like very surprising. And so even when I was walking around Paris, I was like, should I really feel scared here? That stuff in San Francisco, as far as I can tell, or any major city in the West, hasn't really been fixed because you haven't had a shift in leadership yet where they've really said, okay, we're going to double down on policemen and policing, and we're going to amp up the punishment. That hasn't happened.
CPI higher than expected for 3 straight months now. As we all know, the Fed did 11 rate hikes in 2022 and 23, and the intention was that we would see inflation come down to their target of 2% and they would start to lower rates. And obviously, we're not seeing that. Inflation is remaining hot. Things are getting more and more expensive. Housing is up 5.7% year over year. Transportation costs are up 10.7%. Car insurance is up 22.2% year over year. The expectation has been that the market will do rate cuts. Larry Summers came out and said you have to take seriously the possibility that the next rate move will be upwards rather than downwards.
The market was expecting 3 rate cuts this year, which would have been really good news for Biden. And I think this latest inflation print was kind of a dagger to the heart of that expectation. And I think the Wall Street Journal put it best. It said here, Wednesday's report had been hotly anticipated because Fed leaders had been willing to play down stronger than anticipated inflation readings in January and February, as reflecting potential seasonal quirks. But a third straight month of above expectations inflation data erodes that story and could lead Fed officials to postpone anticipated rate cuts until July or later. So it's not just the fact that this inflation print was higher than expected. It was also higher than expected in January and February, but people were willing to kind of overlook that, saying, well, maybe it was just kind of a quirky reading. But now we've had 3 straight months. It's pretty clear that the narrative that we had going into this year, which was that inflation was on its way down, peaked at 9% as the official rate, I think, in 2022, and then it was going down every month through all of 2023. And I think the expectation going into 24 was it would keep going down and we get these rate cuts. Well, after 3 straight months of inflation being more persistent and stickier than people expected, I think that narrative is basically dead. I think the new narrative now is rates are going to be higher longer. And I think Larry Summers is reflecting that view. Larry's going further. He's not just saying that the current rates for longer, he's saying they might actually increase.